to commend Bob for his work. It's very valuable data. It tells a very interesting story. In fact, we're starting to collect more data at Cornell. Maybe Wayne Campbell's got for you to share some thoughts on how the picture plays out in New York. I also should mention I have an allegiance to the University of Vermont and the state of Vermont, and I started my career sponsored by All Things Vermont NOFA as a VISTA volunteer in 1978. My kids, I have two teenagers, and they like to ask me, Dad, did you ride a dinosaur to school? But anyway, I've been at this for many years. Was anybody at the NOFA annual meeting in 1987? Right. I actually got an award for supporting organic farmers in New York. So that was some of my creds here. I also have been a grower, and the co-op that I organized as a VISTA was the first really organic vegetable co-op in the region. Okay, what's going on in New York? Why should we look at growth and barriers? My motivation is that we have seen, and I've worked with farmers and farmer organizations over the last 30 years. Large farms are increasing, small farms are increasing, the farmers in the middle are really getting squeezed. And one motivation for what we're doing in this study is to try and find perhaps some opportunities for those farmers in the middle. We've got a lot of land out in New York State, a lot of farming expertise, barns, equipment. Is there an opportunity to enter organic as it grows? And it's very responsible, high degree of responsibility working with farmers, giving them advice. You really don't want to lead them down a dead end or a blind alley, and you want to prove the case that there are some opportunities before you help promote things. This clicker, for some reason, doesn't want to advance. Down arrow. Okay. There we go. So the underlying goal was to determine current opportunities that exist for New York farmers in this arena. The project is funded through USDA and NIFA and our support at Cornell. It's a 3-year project, started 2.5 years ago on the home stretch. So if you have input, particularly on the marketing and demand side, which is phase 3, we're looking for input. First year objectives, do a literature review, which we did, and develop a database on organic production in New York State, which is what would be the basis of my talk. We published everything in a report. I have copies if you'd like to take one with you. I should credit, well, let me go through this. I think I credited her in here. Further research moving forward, food processing. We did the most extensive study of food and beverage manufacturing in New York State that's been done, identified a large number of firms, and we asked a few questions in that survey about whether they process organic foods. Don't have those results for you, but we're working on finalizing them. So I view growth opportunities from 3 perspectives. What might be growth on the production side, on the intermediary side, distribution, processing, and last but not least, on the demand marketing side. And as Bob said, when prices went up for organic milk, that really brought the profitability picture up for those dairy farmers. So I do a lot of work with startup cooperatives, worked with Flo many years ago. Typically advise growers to start from the market and work back. Is someone going to pay you a premium price that exceeds your cost of production? If not, you really need to think about maybe not growing that or not forming the cooperative. And we're looking at barriers and competitive disadvantages. Not in a position to report on that, but we're getting a list together that we'll test with our advisors. And last but not least, it's what we call in our world a combination Hatch-Smith-Lever grant, it means I'm supposed to do things like this, disseminate the results and to the general public. Okay, getting used to this, we'll get there. Collaborators. There's a number of faculty on campus. Talked to Anu. Faye Benson's our organic dairy specialist. Todd Schmidt and Brad are ag economists. Todd's head up the food and beverage manufacturing study. Brad's done some work on cost of production in collaboration with some plant scientists. I visited with Sarah. Steve Ropel, this project started before he retired. He's retired, but he's with NAS. It was very helpful getting the data that I'll show you. Consultant, the Hartman Group, we think, has done some of the premier market analysis. They're a private consulting group. They agreed to sell us one of their reports for a discount, which we appreciate. Let's see. Other groups, we have what we call PWTs at Cornell, Program Work Teams. And I have an extensive website if you're interested at Cornell. I should have listed it here. E-Extension is a great resource. It's a new, relatively new attempt to try and move extension information and data online. And if you visit extension.org, you can find a lot of valuable information. Organic COP, the program at USDA, Organic Trade Association have all been helpful in bouncing some ideas off. Gia Lee was hoping Gia, she's a grad student in economics, ag economics, native of China. Her family has, of all things, a very successful organic food processing company in China, Hebei, Handan City. And that's a whole other workshop, but there's a fascinating development in China around organic food and growth in demand and farming, and it could be perhaps a solution for some of these small farms that are landlocked. Carol Thompson's my support person. She did a lot of the word processing. Okay, before I wrote the grant, I was proposing to collect data on production in New York, and lo and behold, it's kind of a fortuitous event. Many of you maybe know that USDA conducted the first census of organic agriculture in the US, and they gave us the state level data for New York, which is published in this publication, which is over here if you'd like it. So we'll go through some of the highlights. I'm not going to have time to go through all the data, but it really provides a wealth of data on organic production and different criteria. All these different crops are itemized: livestock, poultry, field crops, vegetables, potatoes, melons, fruits, nursery, greenhouse, maple syrup. As you know, there's some controversy, and this could be actually one of the barriers to growing organic. There's been an ongoing debate. I can tell you stories from 1978 when Ray Gershuni was struggling with trying to help develop some standards, and there were debates going back and forth. But it's fuzzy in consumers' eyes sometimes, what is organic, and it's fuzzy in some growers' eyes. There are these categories: certified, exempt, and transitional. Our local CSA says they grow organic, and they do, but they don't want to be certified, I guess because of the cost, or maybe there's some looking down at USDA as some governmental agency that might be afraid of. Cost sharing for organic certification, Sarah's contact there. So if you do want to get certified in New York, you can get some support. Is that still funded, Sarah?
That's a federal program, still funded.
Great. Okay, dairy farmers, largest group. We have 317, at least according to the survey. There's probably a few more, and this data goes back a couple of years. Cattle sales, these are some revenues from those farms. So they sold, in total, $60 million worth of milk and several $1 million worth of cattle, which is a common source of revenue in dairy farms. Total 62, that's the top of the list. I'll go through the top 10 here. Chicken and eggs, wool, goat, etc. Barley, talked about barley earlier. There's 45 farms growing barley. We have a lot more small grains produced in New York than many folks might realize. Part of our food and beverage manufacturing study, we interviewed bakeries, and there is a commercial consumer flour mill that still operates. So there's a number of opportunities for grain growers. And this, so the first column is obviously the number of farms. Second column is the revenue. I don't think I'll go through all of this in detail with you. Certified vegetable farms, a whole range of vegetables identified. And I think this will talk a little bit about opportunities, but just knowing where farmers are succeeding with certain crop enterprises, certain livestock enterprises, tells you at least that could be a potential growth area.
Brian, would a CSA growing a huge diversity of vegetables be included in these statistics?
If they're not certified, no.
But if they are certified and they're just, if they're growing any
And they
amount
answered
of
the
those-
survey, the
Okay.
census. It's like any census.
Okay.
They really worked hard, and I don't have time to go through the
Right.
process, but we talked to the folks at USDA, and they looked at certification lists for each state. They talked to key players in the industry. They really worked hard trying to get the most
But there
extensive.
was no minimum amount of the crop grown to be.
If you're under 5,000, I think I mentioned these three categories: certified, exempt,
No, there's no minimum amount of an individual crop that would typically.
volume or revenue. I don't think so.
Okay.
Some of them are. These might be few enough that they just couldn't disclose it, but you've got 46,000 for onions, where you have 322,000 for carrots. So it's a variety of volume.
As a CSA grower, they just threw me under the other vegetables, put all our sales there.
Is there an other vegetable category? Oh, sorry.
The very last one.
Okay.
They-
Go to the next.
Other vegetables,
Oh, next word.
76. Like any data set, you can find limitations.
I was just
It's
thinking-
really the best we've got.
Yeah, and in the
And
back
if
of
anyone
that,
has ways of, improving it, or the state, or we don't have funding to do something more extensive within New York, but
yeah, the criteria would be in the back of the 2008 report from NAS.
I see that
About
76 and
yeah,
how
if
many
you want to
answers
see the
question.
whole survey and the process, it's in the
Okay,
report.
thanks.
Brian, do you know or remember by chance how many vegetable farms are in the whole data set total?
If we added those all up, that would be what they have.
No,
No, because
No, it's
some
not.
grow more than one crop,
Yes.
right?
Okay,
Correct.
total, this is vegetables, potatoes, and melons. That can't be right, it's got to be more than that. But it's $59 million in sales.
no, so it is, it's 126 farms who have reported growing all kinds of vegetables,
Oh,
and they parse it out that way.
oh, I see.
Because
Okay.
there's only
So
300
there's overlap
farms in the
these
survey
categories.
who answered the
There's
survey.
only 300.
Well, no, I'm sorry, there's more than that. There's more than that, but they report, so they parse this out, NRCS, NAS, to make sure that there's no double counting of number of farms.
Okay.
That's to see if you're paying attention. There are in nursery and floriculture operations that operate organically. Mushrooms, some berries, strawberries being the major one.
Oh, jeez.
Maple syrup's an interesting crop and interesting enterprise. I would see most maple production pretty close to being certified. I'm not sure what the criteria are. So
Cyanide tablets when you tap, or something
have a
like
what?
that. When they tap, there's some kind of poison.
additive to
Keep the insects away,
keep
and
the-
that's not certified.
that's not allowed. I
And
mean,
cleaning materials,
Why
really-
it's natural.
yeah.
at any rate, does that present a growth opportunity? Ease of transferring commercial to certified. Could be. We'll explore some of that. Okay, top 10. Number 1, milk and dairy cattle. That includes the milk and livestock sales. Corn for both grain and silage. This could be an opportunity. Believe it or not, organic corn, as I understand it, from China was imported for dairy feed in the Northeast. So could we grow more, particularly with those types of costs, and be more confident in the certification? Although China has been more rigorous standards on that front than you might realize. Down the list, vegetables, potatoes, and melons, hay, bale, and haylage, soybeans, all fruit, nuts, winter wheat, maple syrup, some top 10 in all berries. How are we doing? 5 minutes? So other data, and we didn't have a chance to report it all, and if needed, we could go back, but organic sales is a percentage of all farm ag sales. So some are part commercial, some are organic. Net household income generated. We did get a general description. It's very bimodal, as you might imagine. 25%, 36% of those reporting had 25% of household income coming from organic farmers. 31%, which is a pretty large percentage, all of their household income came from organic production. Years involved, 5-year production plan, don't have time to go into that. Are we going to have a Q&A period, or?
We'll have a couple of questions, short ones after you're done, and then a longer discussion session.
Okay, during the discussion period, I'd like to hear any responses on these 2 questions. What do you see as opportunities? What do you see as barriers? Summary, organic agriculture is very diversified. That was one of the take-homes I came away with. There's a lot of variety of production. It accounts for, we have a large agricultural production in the state, still a fairly small share in total, but I think it has opportunities to grow and is growing. Respondents are very positive about the future, which is the same in the Vermont study. That is an interesting result for me, and there's a bunch of attitudinal questions I don't have time to go through, but I work with a lot of farmers that look like me, over 60 and kind of at the tail end of their career, or cooperative boards of directors who can be pretty negative, to be honest, particularly after a bad year of milk prices. The report establishes a useful baseline. I'm not sure whether funding will be available to continue this. It would be great to have some time series data like Bob studied. And I spend most of my time, this is kind of a part-time hat I wear. I'm a director of something called a cooperative enterprise program at Cornell. And I see some real opportunities for cooperation, collaboration, and we can talk about that as well. There'll be a display in the trade show on this council that I work with. Publications, that's the one here, and there's something called a Guide for New Cooperative Development. This is a group that meets in March that I work closely with. It's the Northeast Co-op Council if you have interest in that arena. Okay, thank you.
All right, and brought us back almost on schedule. So anyway, do we have any quick questions for Brian as we...
And I'll be around today and tomorrow too.
Any quick questions?
Well, it's sort of a quick one. I don't know if it's really quick, but one of the things that has been made more clear to me in the past year or two is just that the organic industry in New York and the nation has been, consistently increasing, and including, say, vegetable production, which I'm sort of most interested in. But it turns out that a lot of that is imports. And that surprised me. And I don't know if we have, do we have the statistics of the you know, like, of the increase that's happening every year, how much of that is imports? Do we have that?
There's pretty good trade data. I don't know if it's broken out that way, but let's talk, Brian. We can try and sort that out. There's a mixed story on imports. And we had a famous economist, Max Brunk, who did a lot of work in the apple industry. And the New York apple growers were all upset that there were apples coming from New Zealand and South Africa and Chile. And he did some effective studies that actually showed that increased supply of a product that was in demand increased total. Basically grew a bigger pie that the New York growers could get a bigger piece of. So imports aren't always a bad thing. If it puts apples on the shelf, fresher apples, or they're in the off season, consumers could buy more New York apples in season. So but that's a question we could try and tease out.
USDA ERS in 2008, they have a whole comprehensive report on organic demand and supply, including import, export, domestic, and they broke down by country too. And the report is online.
Yeah, and what I guess I'm most interested in is when we see an increase, is that really happening locally, or is it just the market is increasing, but the local supply and the local suppliers maybe aren't? I don't know how, whether
Yeah,
that's...
they had the analysis
Great.
as a preliminary, like a benchmark study.
Who published that? Do you know the author?
USDA Economic Research Service.
Ah,
Yeah, the
okay.
report was published in 2008. It's a
And
new
the
report.
Foreign Agriculture Service also has some statistics as well. So FAS and ERS
Came out last year.
both have been studying this issue. We can talk more about